I think this is part of the problem, is that we get into an idea that to draw means you must be an artist. But in fact, what we're doing is we're using a drawing to communicate a concept or an idea. And if you set up that drawing in a way where one thing builds on another, it makes it much easier for people to understand.
Welcome to Think Deeply, Speak Simply, the podcast that explores the art and science of business communication. Sponsored by Prezent, the AI-powered platform transforming the way professionals share ideas and tell their stories. And now, here's your host, Rajat Mishra, CEO of Prezent, and passionate advocate for clear and impactful communications.
Every great idea starts as a vision, but turning that vision into reality requires more than words. It needs a picture. As Albert Einstein said, imagination is more important than knowledge. Visual communication isn't just about pretty pictures. It's about creating clarity, sparking emotion, and driving action. By learning how to visualize our ideas, we can foster deep connections and achieve breakthrough results. Today, we are diving into the transformative power of visual communication with Patti Dobrowolski. With decades of experience helping leaders and teams craft compelling visuals, Patti will share why pictures are truly worth 1,000 words and how they can help you draw your future into existence. Whether you're a leader looking to inspire your team or a professional ready to unlock your creativity, this episode has something for you. You learn how to translate your ideas into visuals that captivate and influence. Our guest, Patti Dobrowolski, author of The Non-Obvious Guide to Drawing Your Future, Solve Problems, Explain Ideas, Sell Anything, brings a wealth of experience to the conversation. With over 30 years of experience studying strategic illustration, visual design, and leadership development. Patti, thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to the Think Deeply, Speak Simply podcast.
Wow, Rajat, that was so fantastic. I was like, oh my God, you have encapsulated visual thinking right there in a little presentation. It was beautiful.
Thank you, Patti. I'm sure we'll dive a lot deeper into it. So, Patti, let's start with your journey. It's such I've been reading about it, an inspiring journey. And your work has helped so many leaders worldwide enhance their performance and their presence through visual design. So maybe where we can start, Patti, is you can share about what got you started in visual design and what has brought you to this point.
Yeah, thank you. I started off as an actor, and I wanted to get onto Broadway. And I didn't know how it was going to happen. I took acting classes, but I studied in New York, and I just got into my imagination of seeing myself there. And I drew pictures of myself there. And when I was waitressing in Seattle, I got a call to go to audition for a show, and that show went to the main stage. I got into it. It went to the Kennedy Center, and it went to Broadway. And that all happened within a 6-month period of time. And so I realized something happened with the picture. And later, I started working in business. I got a degree in drama therapy, and I worked in business. But in business, I found that people just were, often in change management, which was my specialty, they were misaligned in what was happening in the room. And if I drew a picture of what everybody was experiencing, everyone felt aligned and seen, and they were ready to move into whatever the change was that needed to happen. So I saw a guy draw a picture in a room in a business meeting. I thought, that guy, I'm going to be that guy. I had never drawn a picture, and so I trained, drawing, trying to figure out how to do it. I did an internship, and at the time I started, there were maybe 12 illustrators in the world.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing story. Patti was just getting inspired and just going for it. So maybe for our viewers, let's start from the basics, right? Let's start from why is drawing pictures more effective than verbal or written communication? And maybe you can tell us what happens in our brain, right? What's going on in our brain that makes us process pictures so differently than verbal and written communication?
Well, if you think about it, what we do is anytime something catches our attention, our brain snaps a picture of it, right? And then it sequences together pictures that create a story, which we call reality. But we bring reality to life through action, but also using our imagination to tap into those pictures, right? So when you want to make any kind of change, if you draw a picture of it, it does a couple of things. And especially if you draw, and most people say I can't draw, but I couldn't either. And I know I can say for a fact you can learn because I was able to, right? But you start off with basics, and you just let the visual picture emerge. You try not to censor what's coming through because your imagination, it's feeding you images every single day. So you just have to learn how to capture them. And what it does is it enhances your understanding. It increases the engagement of people in the room. It's fantastic for memory retention. You know, they did all those studies with students who would sketch note their notes for science, whatever, and that their high achievement. And as you said earlier, you know, it creates a kind of clarification and unification around what we're doing and why.
So interesting. You know, you mentioned something, Patti, about being able to draw. Can I just go back to that for a second? Because, you know, before we get into drawing, I know I can only draw stick figures. Yeah. And I took a class in drawing when I was a kid, and I was asked to move to instrumental music in my creative class. So maybe you can maybe you can start and talk to the fact that, you know, many of us think we couldn't. I'm a computer scientist myself, right? So how do we get over that fear of drawing? Because we'll talk more about how drawing helps us.
Well, let me ask you back a question. What were you afraid of when you were drawing? What happened to you?
Well, I actually thought I was drawing really well.
And then what happened?
It was,
and you got a judgment from someone else.
It was like Picasso. You know, people didn't understand what I was drawing. It was so it was so elemental and so, you know, childlike. It didn't mirror reality. But I did get some feedback that yes, this is not typically great drawing.
Yes, well, I think this is part of the problem, is that we get into an idea that to draw means you must be an artist. But in fact, what we're doing is we're using a drawing to communicate a concept or an idea. And if you set up that drawing in a way where one thing builds on another, it makes it much easier for people to understand. So whenever I started, I was a stick figure person too. But I realized that my fear would often interfere with my ability to draw. And so I didn't know that, you know, if you put your hand on the page and you draw, you'll be more stable in the images you draw. And if you're on a whiteboard and you're left-handed, that's a problem because you smear whatever you've just drawn, right? But there are some tips and techniques to drawing. And one of them is to just practice drawing anything that you see, because everything comes from basic shapes: a square, a triangle, a circle, a comma, a period, a line. It's all from that. And then you add to those things and augment them to make something look like something else. And if you look around the room that you're sitting in right now, right? I have box lights here. That's a square or a rectangle, right? We're looking into our computer, our laptop, and we could easily draw this. This is just a rectangle with a bunch of buttons on it. And that's too much detail. I might just put some lines and cross, and that would be my keyboard. And that, you break it down into the simplest things, and the way to get better is to simply practice. You just draw everything.
Yeah, no, well said, Patti. I think the two things you said about fear, clearly that's back of all our minds being judged. Yeah. And, you know, I'm in the business of software, and like you said, we also break down complex problems into building blocks, and then you combine them, just like you said, break down into squares and circles and rectangles. So well said. Thank you for that. I think people will benefit from it. You mentioned this phrase in your book, "draw your future."
Yes.
Right. I love that phrase, and I've never heard it said that way. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about what does "draw your future" mean, and what power does it have?
Well, when you draw a picture of a future that you desire, as archaic and simplistic as your drawing is, the energy and feeling of what it is that you want comes through your hand onto the page. And whether that picture looks good or not, it sticks in your hippocampus. And so that part of your brain, it's in your long-term memory, and you can call it up to your short-term memory by looking at the picture. So when you draw a picture of a future you desire and you take small, simple action on it, you actually increase your chance of success by 42%. And Hal
42%.
Hal Hirschfield did a study at UCLA about attaching yourself to a future you. You create a strong attachment to your future self, and that allows you to make better decisions in the here and now.
Oh, I see.
So we put that picture up of the thing that we want, and maybe what we want to have is some great job, right? And so what we begin to do in the here and now is start to ask people who's looking for somebody in a new position. Maybe I want to be an SVP of marketing. Maybe I'm already a director of marketing, or maybe I'm just starting off in my career. But I'm going to begin to speak to it, and as you speak to it, then what it does is it taps into what is your reticular activating system. That's that part of your brain that, it pulls to you the things that you're thinking about, because the brain is ultimately just a problem solver. It wants to keep you safe, and so you have to push up against your old negative bias. But once you do and get through it, it will pull to you the things you want. And you just have to watch out for them. You have to see them and look for them.
Yeah.
And then take action.
It's very interesting. I mean, I can see how drawing your future can drive alignment, right, between you and others, because like you say, you're visualizing your future, and kind of the images are helping you.
Yes.
Many of our viewers, Patti, are trying to improve their storytelling.
Yes.
In particular, kind of their business storytelling, right? So maybe you can speak a little bit about, I hear you on the alignment and problem solving.
Yes.
How does visual drawing and help you with business communication, business storytelling?
Yes, and I'll add to that, and let's say that it's about selling. Because I think when we are selling a concept, usually when we're on stage. We tell a personal story about a problem that we had, and then how we got over it. Well, in the Draw Your Future process I created, you look at first where you are now. So just the same way, if you're doing a pitch with a client, you're talking about what's hard for them, where they're having issues, right? Or you get them to talk about what's hard for them, and you simply write the words of what they're saying, scatter them around, and draw a few simple pictures. That's their current reality, what's going well, and what's really challenging for them. And then you say, okay, let's imagine it's a year from today. What do you really want in best case scenario? And then on the other side, you put their future up there, and you add words and pictures to it. Now they understand. Here's where we are. Here's where we're going. Then in the center is a place for you to put 3 bold steps. And those 3 bold steps can be your solution to the problem, you communicating how this new technology you developed will close the gap between their pain point and their future state where they're highly successful utilizing AI, which most people are worried about, right? How do we get that in place? So that's a simple, it's like a little snapshot of the big picture. And for an audience to see you communicate what's the now, what's the future, and what the solution could be for them, it's very helpful. And then because they've seen you draw it, it doesn't have to be a great drawing. It just is the picture, and they'll remember it. Because how often do you see people going up and drawing on the whiteboard? But in fact, the person who goes to the whiteboard is considered the smartest person in the room. They did a study about it. And so anytime you can grab a pen in a room full of people, especially if you feel intimidated, go up there, start taking notes, draw a few pictures, and then explain your idea from that viewpoint.
Yeah, I love that. And I remember that in your book also, where we are, where we can be, and those 3 bold steps as a very simple and powerful framework. And when you've talked to many people about using drawing, right, Patti? So which of those 3 things you think people find most difficulty with? Is it defining the initial state, to-be state, or the three bold steps? Which is the hardest part?
The 3 bold steps are always the hardest part for people, because it's easy for us to imagine ourselves with this magnificent future. The hard part, and the part that's really essential in making any kind of change, is rolling up your sleeves and getting busy. And often people think, I don't know how, right? And you think you have to have the answer, but in fact, your brain has already solved it. If you get out of the way and don't worry if you're going to sound smart enough, or, do a good enough job, or, come up with the best idea, you will come up with a way to start. And every time those bold steps to get yourself through something to the other side, there's always one that's bold. Like if over here you work for somebody and they drive you crazy, and over here you feel completely free and you love your life, you're going to quit that job. That's going to be it. And it's going to scare you, right? Yeah. But most of the time, so there's something that's bold, and then there's a tactical thing, like, if I want to be a speaker, right, or a better speaker, I have to give myself opportunity. So I'm going to push myself on the edge. I'm going to volunteer to present as often as I can, right? That might be your bold step. And the third one, I think, is always a mindset shift. Like, what do I need to change? Because I can, and we can envision this future, right? And haven't you done that before? You've imagined something and then it didn't happen in the time frame you thought, and you're like, what's going on? Why isn't this happening? Where is that perfect partner I've been dreaming about, right? And then what you realize is, and this is the other thing, you have to have a behavioral shift too. You have to change who you are to step into the future you long for. Because who you are now is envisioning that future, but you don't really know who you need to be there. So you have to unpack yourself and stretch yourself to grow into that, so that you align with whatever is needed for you to be that great TEDx speaker, or be that perfect AI deliverer or implementer, or creating the code that you think, right? You have to really work on your part.
It's super prescriptive and helpful. So something really bold that scares you, something kind of tactical that you can improve on, and then the mindset and the behavioral shift, the 3 bold steps. Love that. So, Patti, let's talk a little bit about now we have the framework, how can our viewers develop these visual thinking skills better? Do you have any tips or techniques how people can get better at visual thinking and visual communication?
Yes. So the first thing is always carry a sketch note with you and a pen. And any time that you are listening to someone, whether it is on a call, it's in a Zoom meeting, you're in a room with people, a meeting, you want to sketch what you hear. Because part of what happens is, when you're just doing it on your own without the pressure of anybody watching, you will find that you have your own unique way of expressing certain words. And everybody knows that if somebody says idea and we have to draw a picture of it, like, what would you think we would draw?
Light bulb.
Exactly. So we have a vernacular that's in our head, a pictorial vernacular, right, of these pictures. And all we're doing is grabbing those pictures. So that's one thing that you can do. The second thing is to learn to use the pen properly. A pen, so I'll just, you can't see if you're listening to the podcast, but every chisel point, every pen has a chisel point on it that you use on a whiteboard. One makes a very thin line and one makes a thick line. And my tip is use multiple colors when you are capturing words, and find a black pen to draw the image itself so it stands out. And just do basic shapes, connecting them. Even if you are doing mind mapping, which many people do to brainstorm, come up with ideas, draw your initial concept, write the word in the center, but then challenge yourself to draw it into a picture. If you are creating an eyeglasses for a client, draw the various frames, and then how would the distribution channel look? What would the online ability be? Draw a little picture of a laptop, a person sitting in front of it. They don't have to look like a person. They can be a stick figure, right? So practice is really what makes perfect, and realize every opportunity you get, look at where you are sitting in a room, stop and observe, and try to draw what you see, because drawing what you see will increase your skill just in such a huge way.
Yeah, those are great tips. I actually didn't even realize that the pen has the two, thin line and thick line. And it's just about being mindful, like you said, being mindful about where you are, what you're drawing, and practice. So, Patti, we've talked a lot about visual thinking for individuals. And many of us, in Fortune 2000 companies, we work in teams and large organizations.
Yeah.
So if you just zoom out, any tips or suggestions you have how teams or organizations can adopt visual thinking in their day-to-day?
Well, I think one thing is, so if you're ever having a big meeting, you want to bring someone in to draw a picture of what you are talking about, right? So I was just at, one of the big, Fortune 1 or 2 in the world, right? And there I was drawing the AI concepts for them. And in that space, I used AI on my own to see what it would draw with the concepts I knew they were going to talk about. And I thought, ooh, that's terrible. But it gave me a little structure to think about how I could organize things on the page. Then I drew what they were talking about in the room. And at the end, the leader said to me, that is going in my office because I can use it to communicate everything I need people to understand. And that's the value of having someone there. But if you want to start to draw, just simply ask, would you like me to draw a picture of what we're talking about? Or I'm going to show you in a picture what this might look like. And then you can use, if you're in Zoom, you can use any of the technologies to draw it. And know that it's not just a picture. You're writing the word, and then you draw a link to the next word or a picture of what that might look like. Just in the same way, when you're writing code, right? And you're trying to describe for a room full of people, this is how the code looks, and then this is where you change it right here. Just imagine that you're going to do that as a picture. Here is, so with an SAP implementation, right? I worked at McKesson for one of those, and I drew pictures of people going to the keyboard, putting in the information, and then we watched how it changed in the whole chain of command, right? How did it change in the supply chain? What were people needing to do differently? And that, I think, then everybody at all levels understands, wow, okay, we never used to have to do that or that. And you can highlight all those things that are different. Even if you're doing it in code and you're writing out the code, highlight what it is and draw a little picture of how that will make it different.
Awesome. Great tips. And all of us are, we are more naturally drawn to words and talking, but I think these are great ideas, Patty, for us to try something different and break through some of the noise. So, Patty, we're at the quick fire part of our discussion. Ready. So I have 5 questions for you. You haven't heard them before. And scary. I will tell you the question. And the first thing that comes to your mind, just tell us what that is. Right?
Okay. Ready.
Or draw a picture if you would like to do that as well. That's also fine. So question number 1. What's one word you would use to describe effective storytelling?
Engaging.
Engaging. Okay. What is your go-to visual tool or app?
ChatGPT.
Okay. Can you describe your favorite type of whiteboard moment?
Yes. I was in a meeting and people were throwing spitwads at me because I was the change agent come in at the end of a change where people had gotten laid off, and I was with the people who remained. And I went to the board and I drew a picture of what it felt like to be them, and they all relaxed and shook my hand at the end.
Okay, that's a great story. What's one mistake people make when communicating visually?
They overthink what you're doing. When you overthink, your critics in the room and everybody's still talking and you've missed it all. So just be in the flow.
Okay, be with the flow, be water. What's your favorite shape to start drawing with and why?
My favorite shape is a curve because I think that people, they don't know how to draw. They don't know how to draw people, right? And it's really easy to draw people if you start with their hair. And then you add on their eyes and their nose. I didn't know how to draw real people for a long time. But if you start by drawing someone's hair and make it kind of curvy, then you can add the chin on the bottom and then the eyes and the nose and the mouth. And there you have it.
That's a cool tip, Patti. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. Any final thoughts you want to leave our listeners with that we did not cover? And I know many listeners want to learn more about you and your work. So where can they connect with you?
Yes, well, I would just say, just know you can become the wizard at the whiteboard just by grabbing a pen and going up there and put that on repeat, and you will become, I guarantee, after a month of you going to the whiteboard, you will be far superior to where you started. So always start. And you can get a hold of me on Instagram. I'm Up Your Creative Genius. LinkedIn, I'm my name, Patti Dobrowolski. Facebook, Up Your Creative Genius. And that book just came out, The Non-Obvious Guide to Drawing Your Future. And go in there and get it. It's a simple tutorial. It'll show you exactly how you can become the wizard at the whiteboard. It was awesome. So great to be with you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Patti. And we'll make sure we'll have the notes to the amazing book. I think it's very prescriptive, easy to follow, and very powerful. So we'll have notes in the podcast. So thank you again, Patti, for joining us. Next week, we'll meet more incredible guests and continue to explore the question, what makes great storytelling great? Until then, let's think deeply, speak simply.
Thanks for tuning in to Think Deeply, Speak Simply. This episode was brought to you by Prezent, your secret weapon for brilliant presentations. Visit Prezent.ai to transform how you communicate. Until next time, keep thinking deeply and speaking simply.